I was talking to some people on Twitter about Notion and how I use Notion to Anki, and I just wanted to show you how I use it rather than just tell you because I think it just makes more sense for me to show you. So I'll start off by explaining how I use Notion. So on the right, you see my Notion page for my 6th week of this block. I'm a med student, so we go by blocks. And this is a 12-week block. I'm on week 6. And you can see I created a header for this lecture, which was on stroke, so lecture 26 on stroke. What I'll do first before the lecture is I'll list out the objectives for the lecture, just so that I can get an idea of what we're going to be learning about. So you can see we're learning about epidemiology and demographics of stroke, pathophysiology, risk factors, anatomy, and how to investigate and manage it. After the lecture, or you could do this before the lecture as well, I list out more toggles based on the objectives, as well as based on me skimming the actual lecture slides and seeing what's emphasized or what the broad topics are throughout the lecture. I find in med school it's really easy to focus in on the tiny, tiny details, and yeah, those are important, but you're not going to remember everything. So it's important to get a general idea of what's being taught as well. So under our objectives, we had an objective on epidemiology and demographics, so I made a toggle on stroke epidemiology and demographics. Once you have your list of broad topics down, I will go through after watching the lecture, after attending lecture, and based off of those notes, I'll create some active recall questions on points that I found the lecturer emphasized or things that I think are important for me to know. So for example, this lecturer talked about stroke's rank as a cause of death in Canada, and it's the 3rd leading cause of death. And you can really see how just having these active recall questions are a lot easier or more fun and more effective as a mechanism of learning rather than just listing out all of these points. If I had bullets of 3rd leading cause of death, leading cause of adult disability, 60% of people will end up with some disability after a stroke, I guarantee I would not remember that, but by having these questions laid out, it really forces you to think, and you don't assume that you know something just because you read it rather than actually remembering it. So it's a really good way to test yourself. And the reason that I use Notion rather than something like cue cards or Anki is because I find that I really need that context that comes with traditional studying straight from your notes. Whereas with cue cards, I feel like you jump from this card to that card, from this topic to that topic, and sometimes it can just really feel very disjointed, and I need that context, and I need to be able to kind of read the whole story in order to understand. And once I understand, I can go on to more specific details and using that more cue card strategy. I also find that making these active recall questions is a really good learning activity for me, and so I find it really helpful. But let's say I've made my Notion active recall questions after attending lecture, after reviewing the objectives, but now I have a bunch of lectures to review and I don't want to think about which lecture I need to study today or tomorrow or the day after. And so basically what I'll do is use Notion to Anki. And that allows me to take advantage of the spaced repetition aspect of Anki and how it basically just schedules everything for you. You just open up your Anki, see what's due that day, and just do it, you know? So how do we do that? Basically, I start off by adding another page. So plus sign, and then we can call this stroke Notion to Anki, and create a subpage. Then what I'll do is I'll copy all of these toggles with their questions within them. Oh, you can't copy that way. So Command C. Oh, I misnamed that. That's fine. We'll rename it. Command C, copy them, and then paste them into this new page. And then what we're going to do next is we're going to take all of these questions out of their broad categories so that we end up with a single list of all of the questions that we want to be turned into Anki cards. So I'm just going to highlight them and move them over. And then we can delete the broad categories. And what I like to do before actually trying to make the cue cards, I like to skim this list of questions and see if they just make sense as cue cards. So just scrolling through. So this guy doesn't really make sense. Arterial supply to the brain, ... what supplies. Okay, so we can... Okay, so this is asking what vessel supplies the anterior circulation of the brain. So I'll change that. What vessel supplies or provides anterior circulation? Oops. And then same with this question. So what vessel? Oops, not anterior, we mean posterior. So I always like to check, not only did this point not make sense, but I had sub questions, which are what I would want to be turned into a card. I wouldn't want that higher up prompt to be turned into a card. So I'll just move these out and then delete that broader toggle. And then same thing here. So these don't really make sense. Anterior cerebral artery stroke, that general higher level broad topic doesn't make sense as a card, but the questions within it, the toggles within it do make sense. So I'm just going to move them out of that. And the same thing with the middle and posterior cerebral artery strokes. And we'll just delete these. Oops. These are broad questions, but I think it's fine. Oh, I just moved that into a subcategory. We're not doing that. Okay. What did I just do? Undo. Okay. So basically you get the gist. Grab all of these questions that you want to turn into Anki cards and make sure they're in a single list so that you can look at the question. That's what you'll be asked by Anki, and then whatever you have under the toggle is what will be the answer for your Anki card. So now it's time to actually make the Anki cards. What we're going to do is export this Notion page. So you go to the top right corner of your Notion, click that 3 dots, and then go down to export and export it as an HTML file. And I'm going to save it to my download, so we'll call this file stroke Notion to Anki. Save. And then we're going to go over to our web browser, go and just Google Notion to Anki. I always just Google it. And it's that first point, or that first website that comes up, toanki.net. And then select Get Started. And then what it prompts you to do is to upload that file that you had exported from Notion. So we're in my downloads folder, select stroke Notion to Anki, and then open. And then I don't really mess with any of these card options. We do not want to subscribe. And then just click convert. So our download is ready, click download. And then if you open, it'll open your Anki, or it should. There's my Anki. So stroke Notion to Anki. And you can see now that I can go into the deck and study, and it'll prompt me with those questions. So what are the symptoms of middle cerebral artery stroke? And then it has all of the answers. I do not know this, so we're going to click hard. What vessel does the MCA originate from? Internal carotid? Okay, so I kind of know that, but I don't trust myself, so we're going to still click again. But you see the point. Basically, this is just a really quick way for you to turn your Notion notes into Anki cards. It took me a while to do it here because I was talking through it, but once you get the hang of it, it's very fast, much faster than manually moving or manually making those Anki cards. So I hope that helped. I hope it made sense. And I'll just sign off. Bye.